Hello friends, this is my third video on literary terms and concept. In previous two video, I have tried to cover near about 20 literary terms and concept. In this video, I am going to cover near about 10 literary terms. The first literary term is Soliloquy. Soliloquy is known as Swagat in Marathi. Soliloquy is the act of talking to oneself, whether silently or aloud. In drama, it denotes the convention by which a character alone on the stage utters his or her thoughts aloud. The dramatists have used this device as a convenient way to convey information about characters' motives and state of mind, or for purposes of exposition, and sometimes in order to guide the judgments and responses of the audience. Friends, the dramatists have used this dramatic technique, dramatic device in order to expose the character at the same time. With the help of a soliloquy, we understand character's state of mind, his mental condition, his mental state, and at the same time it is used in order to guide the judgments and responses of the audience. This kind of device used by Marlowe in his drama Dr. Faustus. Dr. Faustus opens with a long soliloquy. The best known of all the soliloquies is Hamlet's speech, which begins with "to be or not to be, that is the question." Here I would like to give another example from the drama Macbeth. In Macbeth, Lady Macbeth utters a famous soliloquy like, "Here is the smell of blood, all the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand." In this way, soliloquy is a term used by dramatists in their dramas to expose the character's mental condition and their judgment. Okay. Now we turn towards the next term, aside. Aside is a dramatic device in which a character expresses to audience his or her thought or intention in a short speech, which by convention is unaudible to the other characters on the stage. There is a basic difference between soliloquy and aside. In soliloquy, characters speak to himself whether silently or aloud. Here, aside is a short speech. Okay. It is unaudible to the other characters on the stage, but it is audible to the audience or the reader. Aside, this device is used in a classical dramas of the East and West. The great American dramatist Eugene O'Neill revived and extended the aside and made it a central device throughout his play, Strange Interlude. In short, this dramatic device is used in classical dramas. And Eugene O'Neill, great American dramatist, make it popular in his play Strange Interlude. Now next term is melodrama. The term melodrama was originally applied to all music plays including opera. The Greek word melos means song. In the early 19th century London, many plays were produced with musical accompaniment to give an emotional tone to the scenes. Here, the term melodrama comes from the Greek word melos, which means song. In short, melodrama is a musical performance with the accompaniment of a musical instrument. The term melodrama is often applied some of the typical plays, especially during the Victorian period, that were written to be produced to musical accompaniment. Here, in melodrama, the music is compulsory, the music is important. The protagonists in melodramas are flat types. The hero and the heroine are embodiment of virtue and the villain is a monster. The story and incidents are improbable. The examples of melodramas are Under the Gaslight, published in 1867. Second example is the Barber of the Filth Street, published in 1842. This is a melodrama. The next term related to drama, that is dramatic irony. Dramatic irony involves a situation in a play or a narrative in which the words or acts of a character carry a meaning unperceived by himself or other characters but understood by the audience. Okay, dramatic irony is a situation which is understood by the audience but it is unperceived by the other characters on the stage. They expect the opposite meaning what the fate hold in a store. Writers of Greek tragedy who based their plots on legends whose outcome was already known to their audience made a frequent use of this device. Sophocles' Oedipus is a very complex example of a tragic irony. Means dramatic irony. This dramatic device used by writers of Greek tragedy, and we have a famous example of a dramatic irony, that is Sophocles' Oedipus. It is a very complex illustration of a tragic irony. The next term is metaphysical conceit, and this term is related to poetry. The word conceit is used in place of a metaphor, but there is a slight or basic difference between the metaphor and conceit. Conceit is a standard kind of a comparison. Okay, here metaphysical conceit is a characteristic feature in the John Donne and other metaphysical poets of the 17th century. In a simple words, metaphysical conceit is a characteristic feature of a metaphysical poetry. John Donne and his companions, metaphysical poets, they used a new kind of metaphor, a new kind of comparison that is called as conceit. Metaphysical conceit was described by Samuel Johnson in his famous passage in his Life of Cowley as a wit, which is a combination of dissimilar images or discovery of occult resemblances in things apparently unlike. At the same time, Samuel Johnson, in his Life of Cowley, describes metaphysical conceit as the most heterogeneous ideas yoked by violence together. Means in metaphysical poetry, poets uses the comparison, uses metaphor in a dissimilar images. There is a combination of different images. In metaphor, we get a comparison of the different things which have the same qualities or same features. Here we take up an example. The most famous metaphysical conceit is Duns Compass conceit in his poem A Valediction Forbidding Morning. In this example, there is a comparison between the continuing relationship of lover and his beloved, the coordinated movement of 2 feet of the compass. Okay, when the poet was comparing the love between lover and his beloved with the help of a conceit, that is a metaphysical conceit. Now next term is related to poetry, that is called as confessional poetry. Confessional poetry refers a type of narrative and lyric verse which deals with the facts and intimate mental and physical experiences of the poet's own life. What is confessional poetry? Means confessional poetry is a kind in which the poet he himself expresses his own experiences. Confessional poetry was written in rebellion against the demand for impersonality by T.S. Eliot and the New Critics. We are aware about impersonality theory by T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot, in his famous essay Tradition and Individual Talent, he introduced a theory of impersonality. T.S. Eliot expects poets should be completely impersonal while he was expressing emotions in his poetry. T.S. Eliot expects from poets he should be like a catalytic agent. But here, confessional poetry expresses poets' own feelings, own experiences. That kind of poetry is called as confessional poetry. In short, confessional poetry is completely rebellious against the theory of impersonality by T.S. Eliot. Confessional poetry differs from religious confessions in its secular subject matter, and also differs from poems of the Romantic period representing the poet's own circumstances, experiences, and feelings. Confessional poems were written by Allen Ginsberg, Sylvie Plath, Anne Sexton, John Berryman, and other American poets. The next terms is connotation and denotation. In widespread literary usage, the term denotations of a word is its primary meaning, such as the dictionary ordinarily specifies. Means in short, denotations means primary meaning, and Connotation is the variety of a secondary or accompanying meaning which it suggests. Okay, here there are the two terms. Number one is connotation and denotation. Denotation is a primary meaning and connotation is a secondary meaning. Let us take one example. The word home denotes the place one lives, and the word home connotates privacy, intimacy, and coziness. In his poem Virtue, George Herbert wrote, "Sweet day, so cool, so calm, so bright, the bridal of the earth and sky." The word bridal is used for a union between human beings, serves as a part of the ground for applying the word as a metaphor to the union of earth and sky. The next term is lyric. Lyric is an fairly short poem consisting of the utterance by a single speaker who express a state of mind or a process of perception, thought, and feeling. Lyric is a very short poem. In it, the poet expresses his own state of mind or his own thought, feelings, and perception. Many lyric speakers are represented as musing in solitude. In dramatic lyrics, however, the lyric speaker is represented as addressing another person in a specific situation. Here we have examples: John Donne's canonization and William Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey. This is a lyric. The varieties of lyric are infinite. R.J. Race has distinguished the three types of lyric. Number one is the direct and spontaneous lyric. Second one is the formal type or the sonnet form. And third one is intellectual or metaphysical lyric. Now, next term is sonnet. Sonnet is a poem of 14 lines with a fixed rhyme scheme. Sonnet is a lyric poem consisting of a single stanza of 14 iambic pentameter lines linked by intricate rhyme scheme. In a simple words, sonnet is a poem of 14 lines with a fixed rhyming scheme. Sonnet is distinguished into main two patterns: the Italian or Petrarchan sonnet and the English or Shakespearean sonnet. There was one more variant, that is the Spenserian sonnet. Okay, here we have the two main types. The first one is called as a Italian sonnet. It is also called as a Petrarchan sonnet. The second type is a English sonnet and it is also called as a Shakespearean sonnet. We will see one by one. The number one is the Italian sonnet. It is also called as a Petrarchan sonnet. It is called as Italian sonnet because it was developed in Italy and it was borrowed by some English poet in England later on. Italian sonnet is also called as a Petrarchan sonnet because it was handled by Petrarch, a great Italian poet. The Italian sonnet falls into two main parts. The first part is octave and second part is called as a sestet. Octave means a stanza of 8 lines rhyming as A B B A B B A. And sestet is a stanza of 6 lines and rhyming as C D E C D E or C D C C D C. In short, the Italian sonnet consists of 14 lines, and these 14 lines are divided into two stanzas. The first stanza is consist of 8 lines, so it is called as octave. Second stanza consists of 6 lines, is called as a sestet. It was introduced into England by Sir Thomas Watt in the early 16th century. Now we will see a second type of a sonnet, English sonnet or Shakespearean sonnet. The Earl of Surrey and other English experimenters in the 16th century also developed a stanza form called English or the Shakespearean sonnet. It is called as English sonnet because it was borrowed by English poet from Italy to England. So it is called and it was practiced, it was popular by the English poet, so it is called as English sonnet. At the same time, this kind of sonnet is called as Shakespearean sonnet because Shakespeare make it popular and he makes some changes. He changed the rhyming pattern of Italian sonnet and he developed the new style or the new rhyming pattern. This sonnet falls into 3 quatrains and a concluding couplet. Means the Italian sonnet is divided into the 2 parts, octave and sestet. But Shakespeare, for his convenience, he divided 14 lines into 4 parts. The first 3 parts is called as a quatrain. Quatrain means a stanza of 4 lines. And the 4th stanza consists of 2 lines. It is called as a couplet. This is the sonnet. With this, I am looking forward to see you again. Bye bye.